Hello and welcome back to part 3 of this Nebula space scene project. And in this part we're simply going to be adding just a few details to finish off the scene. The first thing I'd like to do is something I probably should have done earlier, and that's to punch through some of these background stars. So I'm in my background group, which I've called Starfield. And what I want to do is make a new group just above Starfield Flare, so at the top of this group, Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to put those 4 Starfield Flares elements that I've got, put them into that new group. So Command-1 to reveal the inspector pane, and let's come to the library, Command-2. Let's come to Filters, Color Correction, and Open EXR Tone Map, and I'm going to add that to this group. And the reason I like using this, let me come to the inspector, F3, is that you can really push some of these levels really hard. So I'm going to set the exposure to 3. And I think you can see if I turn that on and off, that's really pushed through some of those stars and given it a lot more life. We could also experiment with maybe pulling those Starfield stars into that same group. See if that works. That's probably worth doing as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to create a simple star that is going to sit up here in the top right hand corner. So I'm going to make a new group right at the top here and call this star. Command-2 for the library, come to the generators, and I'm going to look for lens flare and bring that into that group. F4 to come to the lens flare controls here. I want to set a nice wide width, so 2048, and let's set the height to 1920. Don't forget this lens flare is composited on black, as we discovered earlier, and the issue with that is it makes compositing sometimes quite difficult and you start seeing the edges of that black bounding box. Let's turn on the overlays and let's select the Adjust Item tool, and then I can pick up the lens flare and move it over into position there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move that star group behind Dark Nebula. So that's Command /, and the effect of that is it's shining past that Dark Nebula, and I really like that look. It really adds the feeling of depth. Let's come back to the lens flare properties here, and we'll change the size to 750. The intensity I want to go for 1.5. Just want to change that outer colour to be maybe a little bit cooler, something like that. Change the streak colour to be much more goldeny kind of looking. The streak intensity I'm going to crank all the way up to 1. The streak count I'm going to reduce to 15. And the streak noise frequency I want to animate. So first of all I'm going to set the value to 0. Oh, actually it has to be set to 1. And then I'm going to right click, add parameter behavior, ramp, and I'm going to set a start value of 25 and an end value of 27. And what that will do is very slightly animate those rays through the course of the scene. Okay, so that's pretty much the star set up. The next thing I want to do is to make a planet. So let's make another new group, Command-Shift-N, and let's call this planet. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the library, we're going to come to Content, and down here I'm going to click on the magnifying glass search icon thing, and I'm going to type Slate, and that brings up Slate Red, and I'm going to bring that into the project, and I'm going to clear my search results. The first thing I want to do with this is to color correct it. So let's Filters, Color Correction, Levels, apply that to Slate Red, F3 for the inspector. And I'm just really going to crank up that black level so we've got something really strong like that. I'm going to make a new group above Slate Red, Command-Shift-N. Make sure this is 2D, and I'm going to put Slate Red into that group. Then I'm going to come back to the library, Command 2. I'm going to look for distortion and sphere. And I'm going to add that to that new 2D group that I've made. And that's given us the beginnings of a planet. So the next thing we want to do is add some shading to make this look much more like a genuine 3D object. So to do that, we're going to come to the library, Command 2, click on Generators, and we're going to look for Gradient. And I'm going to bring it in just above Slate Red into that group there with the sphere. So F4 to come to the generator. And let's twirl open the gradient. Actually, first of all, I want to come down here to type and set that to radial. So I'm going to throw away this left-hand color tab here, and I'm going to click on the right one, and I'm going to make that black. Then I'm going to create a new opacity tab at the top here. I'm going to, all the way over on the right, click on the left-hand one and set the opacity for that down to 0. Then I'm going to turn on the overlays, Command /. I'm going to select Adjust Item. You should be able to toggle through, but sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Motion is a little bit flaky in that respect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the start and end of that gradient till I get that result. And as you can see, that's now giving me a nice shading on the far side of the planet. My next step is going to be to duplicate that gradient, so Command D. Let's call this gradient light. And the first thing I want to do with this one is I want to flip the positions of these two opacity tabs, and I can do that using this little icon here at the top. And you'll see that flips those two values. Let me first of all come to the properties for this layer and set the blend mode to add, and F4 to come back to the gradient controls. I'm going to move this black opacity tab over towards roughly the 2/3 point there. Then I'm going to add some color. So I'm going to click on this right hand tab here, click on the color swatch, move it over towards red, bring up the level. Let's have it nice and saturated. And then I'm going to make another tab here, and I'm going to push that a little bit more orange. Make another one over here. I'm around 15% there, and this one I'm going to make even brighter, more yellow. Bring it up to about there, I think, and then come all the way to the left here, create a final one, click on that and make that white. And then what I'll do is, we've still got our overlay here. You'll see that I've got all those tabs represented on this overlay. So this one here is an opacity. Move that up and down. You can shift that position. And these are my colors, so I can shift those as well. So I can grab that white one there and bring it down a bit till we get a brighter edge there, just as though that's really being hit by that light. Won't get too carried away, that's good enough for now. So the next thing I want to do is to add a little bit of movement to this. So I'm going to come to my library, Command 2, and I'm going to look for Caustics, and I'm going to drag that in just above Slate Red and hit F4 to come to its controls. And this color I'm going to set to sort of a nice deep reddy kind of warm red. And just want to reduce the size down to about 0.1, the speed down to 0.2, and the refraction down to about 130. And the brightness I'm going to crank up to 100. Now you have to type in a value there in order to be able to get to 100. You can't push the slider that far. It's one of those interesting sliders that works that way. And then I'm going to hit F1 for the layer controls and set the blend mode to color dodge. And that gives me this nice effect of some sort of heat activity on the surface of the planet. Okay, so there's a couple of extra things that I'd like to do here. The first one is that I'd like to add a little bit of movement to this planet. Let me first of all solo it by holding down the Alt key and clicking on the disclosure tick box for the planet. And that solos the planet. Now if I select the planet and come to the Z rotation and rotate it, you'll notice that's not what we want at all. The light moves rather than the planet itself. So what we need to do is we need to be moving the image map for the planet. So if I come to Slate Red, you can see that I can now rotate that, and that lighting stays in place. But we also need to rotate the caustics, obviously. So in order to do that, let's make a new group just above the caustics. So that's Command-Shift-N, and put those caustics and Slate Red inside that group. And then if we select that group and we click on the Z rotation and we right click, add parameter behavior rate, let's type in a rate of 2 degrees, and you'll see that now rotates exactly as we'd like. And finally, I'd like to add a little bit of glow because this is all rather sharp and unconvincing. So I'm going to select the planet 2D group, so the group just inside the main group. Command-2 for the library, filters, glow, and I'm going to add a glow filter above the sphere filter. F3 for its controls here, and set a radius of 60. Opacity I'll reduce down to 0.6. The threshold I'll reduce to about 0.5, I think. Just want to get a little bit of a sense of that glowing rim. Let's try reducing the threshold. Yes, that'll work better actually. If we reduce it down to about 0.2, it's taking in more of those brightly lit areas. Okay, so that's our planet done. So we can hit Control-Shift-S, brings everything back. Okay, so let's just move the planet into the position that we want. First of all, let's scale it down to much smaller. Let's go down to 5%. Then I want to enter an X value of -225, a Y value of -150, and a Z value of +1000. Bring it much closer to the camera. What I'd also like to do is to add a throw behavior, so Command-2 for the library, behaviors, basic motion, throw, and I'll add that throw behavior to that planet group, and hit F2 for the controls, open the throw velocity here, and that throw Z value I'm going to set to 50, and that'll bring it closer to the camera during the scene. Now, if I zoom in here, you'll see I've managed to introduce an edge here that wasn't there before. And that's because of my adding that OpenEXR tone map down here on the star field. Let me turn that off. It was sort of already there, but I've exaggerated it by the push that I've done there on the exposure. If I just enter a knee low value of -1, that takes care of that, while still giving me that nice extra punch on those stars. So that's pretty much done. There's one final little detail that I think would be really nice, and that's to add some shooting stars to this scene, which I think will really add to that sense of depth and scale. And because this project is now extremely heavy and got loads and loads of layers in it, I don't want to add yet another particle system to weigh it down. I can do this in a new project. So Command-Shift-N to make a new project. We'll select 1080, 24 frames a second, 10 seconds long, just as our main project is, and open that up. And the first thing we need to do, as usual when making an emitter, is to create a circle. So C for the circle tool, hold down the Shift key, draw out a circle, F1 to come to the transform and center it up, F4 for the shape properties. Let's set a feather of around 10 just to soften it off a bit. And then we'll hit E to make an emitter. Here under shape we're going to select rectangle, and the arrangement we'll set to random fill. Let's open up the size here, And we want to make this really big, so 7500 for the width and 5000 for the height. Now I also want to enable the 3D button because I want the particles to come towards the camera, so turn that on. That brings up these extra directional controls. I'm going to zero out the longitude and set an emission range of 15. I want to come back to the properties for this layer and F1. What I want to do is I want to twirl open the position and move that back to minus 5000, so it's sitting way back, and you can start to get the idea of how this is going to work. Let's come back to the emitter, F4, and now we don't need nearly as many of these, so I'm going to be turning down a lot of these to almost nothing. So birth rate right down to 0, birth rate randomness to 2, initial number to 1, life to 3, life randomness to 5. But we want a lot of speed, so let's set the speed to 1500 and the speed randomness to 100. And that's giving us this effect. Just a few. And what we also want to do is we want to come down to here to the opacity over life. Twirl that open. Let's set a tab here and a tab at the right hand side. The left hand tab let's turn down to nothing, 0, opacity of 0. Right hand tab, opacity of 0, so they fade out over life. And then we're also going to change the color mode to over life, so we can change their color as they die. So let's click on the right hand tab and click on the swatch, and let's make them go red as they die. Could start them off almost white. And now we've got some shooting stars. So what we want to do is we want to give these particles a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to come over to render here and turn on motion blur. But obviously that's not giving us much of a streak because they're not moving that fast. Let me hit Command J to come to the project properties, and then we can affect the motion blur parameters here. And if I increase the shutter angle, the more I increase the shutter angle, the more I get this extended streak. So here's what they're now looking like, and I think those are just a bit too big. Yes, so let's just park on the first frame here, and what we can do is just simply come down to the scale of the emitter and probably set that right down to 50, because anything that moves is always going to be quite visible against a relatively static background. So I think that's quite nice. So now all we need to do is to export this as a movie, share export movie. Let's set the codec to 42 proxy, and let's render it out as shooting stars. And then what we can do is we can come back to our original project, Nebula scene, and we can make a new group, Command-Shift-N, file browser, and we'll grab our shooting stars and bring it into that group there. F1 to come to its blending mode, because that's obviously got a black background, killing everything else. So let's just set the blend mode to linear dodge. And they're probably not going to be visible until we start rendering it, but they really will make a difference. So there you go. I think that's pretty much the whole scene completed. I just want to make a check that our camera is doing what we want it to do. Come down to the camera. I've set up a little motion here where we're moving about 50 pixels in Z. I think I might reduce that. I just don't want to get too close and make it all look a bit hokey. So we're starting out here and we're ending about here. Probably that's still too much. Let's go to -30 because we want to feel that we're traveling really large distances. I might even go to -25. Keep changing my mind here. I think that's a better idea. Obviously this project has now got pretty heavy and there are lots of layers to it. In fact, I'm going to count them up and tell you how many layers there are. So I've counted 98 layers, and that is quite a lot really for a little $50 program to be handling. So all credit to Apple for having produced something which is pretty amazing on performance. So all we need to do now is render it out and see how it all looks. So needless to say, I'm seeing loads of things there that I'd probably do differently another time, but hopefully you've seen enough of the techniques involved to make a much better job of it yourself. So anyway, thanks very much for staying with this epic project, and I hope you get good results from it, and I hope to see you again for the next one. Thanks very much for watching.